Welcome to Massive Passive Cashflow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Hello, and welcome back to the Massive Passive Cashflow podcast. This is Gary Wilson, your host. We're glad to have you back. We got a great guest today, Clay Hepler from the Yinzer city of Pittsburgh. We just having a laugh about that. As many of you know, I lived there for a quarter century, and most of my investing was done there too. So we got a great guest for you. Before we get into the subject matter, though, if you could please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. It's on 30 different channels, including your favorites like Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio. And while you're online, definitely go check out the new website. It's globalinvestoragent.com. And this is where you'll find the agents that are trained to work with you. You and I, we're all investors here, right? These agents are not your traditional agents, right? They're different. They know how to identify, analyze, and negotiate on and off market deals. And more importantly, they have all the tools needed to help you be successful. For example, they can access all the information on properties and people for everyone in the entire country. No stone left unturned. Loan information, tax information, all the usual probate, bankruptcy, foreclosure. They got all that, but they have a lot more, and this helps you get better deals. So, in any case, more on that later. For right now, let's introduce Clay. So, Clay, first off, thank you from all of us for being on. We appreciate you taking your time to do this.
Absolutely, Gary. I really appreciate. I was expecting at some point during this conversation for PLI to come up as a guy that's been invested in Pittsburgh for a long term. PLI, Pittsburgh Licensing and Inspections, is sort of like the nightmare governmental organization around there. So I'm sure we'll share a couple of laughs around that. But yeah, so my background is pretty unconventional. I was following a conventional path, which was go to school, go and work for the State Department. I was an aspiring ambassador. And I was spending some time in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And I thought I wanted to be an ambassador. So I was working for the embassy, working with some NGOs down there, and ended up being a horrible experience, to say the least. It wasn't meritocratic, right? When you put in work and time as entrepreneurs, most of the entrepreneurs and your listeners know this, if you put in value in time, the output is leveraged. You can get disproportionate returns for that, right? And in this, it's time in, time out. And you got to put your 5 years in to get to the next rank. And I really didn't like that. So I joined a family business here locally, luxury chocolate, and helped scale that massively to nationwide, partnering with small businesses. And along the way, I met a gentleman who was a tremendously successful entrepreneur, someone that I've never, of someone of that caliber, I'd never, ever had an interaction with. And he taught me a lot about wealth building, the fundamentals of wealth building. And one of the biggest things was you got to own equity, right? You have to have equity. And so It was either real estate or business at that point. So I chose real estate. So I joined a local company here and was their director of acquisitions, helped scale their wholesaling and flipping business from 0 to a little over 60 deals in the first year, all along sort of taking all the concepts, the methods, and the manners of my mentor of wealth building with me. And now, right now, and I'm sure we'll dig into this today, the creative capitalist firm, my wealth building firm, helps people get to financial freedom faster by helping them get more efficient and effective with their dollars. So in sum, real estate investor, wealth consultant, retired chief of suites of a chocolate company.
There you go. I like it. Hey, are you allowed to say what the chocolate company is? I don't know if that's appropriate or not for your family but
no, absolutely. It's called Scamps Toffee.
Okay. Awesome.
Yep.
So we'll definitely. I'm sure we'll have some good stories to swap from all the years. And it was funny you mentioned the city folks, and what happened with me is I got to know a lot of the inspectors, and I would always be prompt, treat them properly, always ask for their advice, things like that. It turns out a number of them were investors too, so we really hit it off. And they would always show me how to work the system, and legally, of course, but to get things done faster and certain occupancy or codes we'd have to have. They showed me how to locate them and apply them, and use the right language in hearings and things like that. And so it was great, wonderful asset to have those guys. Otherwise, they're going to just basically, run by the book, So, so good lesson for all the investors out there. Get to know the people that are, working for the municipalities, zoning, occupancy, all those people. Get to know them and make sure you always ask them questions like this. Hey, if you were in my shoes, what would be the best thing for you? How do you see me approaching this? What's the best way to approach this property here? And can I call you before we do any work? I want to make sure we're doing everything correctly. Those are the things they like to hear, So
absolutely.
Yeah. So in any case, this isn't about me today. Let's go back to you. So let's go back to the beginning. I'm assuming you went to high school in Pittsburgh, and and maybe you went to university there too. But so the experience you had in South America, you come back to the States, and you met this individual through expanding the family business. Was it a franchise model, or was it more of a like a networking type model for the expansion?
Oh, I mean, it was straight boots on the ground, cold calling. There was no networking. There was no. I mean, it was. We have a secret recipe, and we're going out and we're building relationships with small business owners, and they're carrying our products.
Gotcha.
So
okay, retail.
It was truly an organic business growth. It was quite asymptotic, but it was not franchise. It was kind of carving our own path for sure. I wish it was franchise. It would have been a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, maybe down the road, but for right now, you got plenty of time too. But for right now, it sounds like so you've picked up some of your own properties there. What are you mostly a buy and hold investor? Have you flipped any, or maybe give us an example of your first?
Yeah. So I bought my first building, a house hacked at Gary in August last year. So 2020, excuse me. And I bought a 3-unit. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Mm-hmm. As you can imagine, on your first deal, got a contractor who stole $10,000 from me. Had to move back in with my parents for 6 months. I mean, it was absolutely brutal, but ended up finding the right contractor. This is back to what you mentioned earlier, building the correct relationships. So that contractor saved me. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts around it. And I've since really built up that relationship capital with him and helped him get a ton of other clients. And so I've really paid back the favor, if you will. But from there, we BRRR'd another 3-unit. So BRRRR, for your listeners that don't know, buy a property, renovate it, renovate it completely, put renters in there, and then refinance it at a higher number to get your cash out. Mm-hmm. We did with that one. Then we did that with a single family home. I was on a call with my partner today, which is my fiancé, soon to be wife, and we're deciding that we're going to sell it. We're going to flip this single family home because don't want to deal with a single family home. We just want to go straight into apartments. And so we have a 6-unit that we closed about 2 months ago that we're renovating. We're doing the BRRRR as well with, and then we're under contract and we'll be closing in a couple of weeks for a luxury Airbnb, multi-million-dollar Airbnb. Nice. So we're sort of in the real estate business in a lot of different asset classes. But what I've learned is don't like single family homes. I want large multifamilies. And I'm very interested in sort of the confluence of cash flow and appreciation that you can get with luxury Airbnbs.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And what's interesting is Airbnb it's now considered a mature sector. They've gone public in the last year. So you can own stock in it. But it only started probably 15 years ago. But now that they're firmly established, they're not going anywhere. All the municipalities and the hotels can cry all the blues they want. It's here to stay. They've carved out their own niche. And oddly enough, a lot of the hotels, when they overbook and have overflow, they're now sending them off to the local Airbnbs. That's been a trend in the last couple of years. But what's really neat about the Pittsburgh area is obviously it's not known as a destination area because it's not on a beach or it's not in Florida like Orlando. However, because of the 3 major sports teams and all the concerts and all the festivals and the strong ethnic presence there from different ethnic groups, it is a destination area for those reasons. And also it's a strong business area now. It's a stable economy. My gosh, you got higher education, you've got strong medicine, you've got high tech, and you've got finance. Okay, versus 60, 70 years ago when it was all about steel. It's completely gone through a renaissance. And so we know Airbnb owners up there that are crushing it more than the Airbnb owners in San Diego and, in West Palm Beach, So, yeah.
No, it's so true that there's a lot of opportunity here. And what a really interesting fact was, and I might be misquoting this, but in my market, and I'm sort of giving away the farm now, all your listener base is going to be coming to Pittsburgh after this call. But Pittsburgh is a Midwestern city, right? And one of the biggest things that we look at when we're looking at investing in a market, as you know, is you want to see population growth, you want to see job growth, but particularly population growth, because what that does is obviously that's a housing that dictates housing need, right? But in Pittsburgh 10 years ago, the median age was about mid-50s, like 55, 56. Now it's 38.
Wow.
What does that mean? What that means for your listeners who don't know is that there's a shortage of housing, because when you're older, you might not be buying houses, right? You're a young family. You might want to buy a house. When you're older, you might be downsizing and moving into an older home. And if, think about it, if the median age is 56, then that means a lot of the population is older than 56. So a lot of the population is in older, maybe they're living with family members or they're in elder care homes. So this is a statistic that I always tell people. And the reason why I'm really long Pittsburgh is because it's a Midwestern city. Cost bases are still very low and the population is getting younger.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. I love it up there. So when I'm up there, I'm actually out in Beaver County. I just like the outdoors, and we have a big deck overlooking the river, and it's awesome. And yet in 45 minutes, I can be at a hockey game or a concert or up on top of Mount Washington. So
right.
But the whole area, there's 7 counties that make up the Pittsburgh metropolitan area that we call the Metroplex or MSA, and obviously everybody knows about Butler County because of Cranberry, and in Washington County was slated as the next growth area, and it to the degree has been, but people don't really pay attention too much to the other counties. And I like Beaver because you've got 376, you got 79, 76, you've got 65, and all these great little towns like Sewickley and Beaver. It's maybe a bet on my part, but I'm betting that that's going to be one of the next big growth areas. Partly because of all the industry that's out there. There's actually a town called Industry, past the town of Beaver. And they just built across the river this massive plant that takes
cracker plant. Yes.
Cracker plant. Yeah. I mean, we were getting rents out there for $650 a unit. Now we're getting $1,300 a unit, because of that.
Yeah.
And it's going to, the long term, it's 650 jobs going out there. I mean, here I am giving away my secrets. But 650 jobs for an area that size, that's a big impact, So
I completely agree with you. There are jobs that when you're up in Beaver County, as you know, Gary, they're coming into the airport. The airport is expanding. They're putting millions of dollars of infrastructure. Yep. I agree completely with you in investing out there, but I won't be investing in single family homes. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. So let me ask you this: so did you get into the multis pretty much right away, or because I figured that out too. My first 2 properties were both fourplexes, and I did eventually do some shingles because I liked having some shingles in the inventory, really just to sell. If I wanted to sell something and raise capital, it's easier to sell a single family home than it is to sell a fourplex. A fourplex you don't generally sell anyways; you keep it, right? But what I did is I had a corral of these shingles that I put them in. I bought them in neighborhoods that I thought had a great potential for gentrification, like the values going up, rebuilding, things like that. And if I figured, okay, if I won the bet, I'd have a great property and remodel it and flip it. But if it turns out it didn't change much, I've got a rental that I can keep, and later on, who knows, one of my tenants might want to buy it. But for the most part, it was definitely the multi. So if you wouldn't mind, explain to people why, what are some of the factors that led you to the multis, and what are some of the big benefits of the multis versus the singles,
Yeah, I mean, the biggest benefit, and this is something that everyone says, right? It's just the economies of scale thing, right? If you have one person that's out of the building and you need to pay your mortgage, like you can get your mortgage covered. And also it allows you to get to scale quicker. I find that a lot of times the real estate investor, when you're under a certain amount of units, which I am under the certain amount of units that is required for effective property management, it's hard to scale, right? Because you get to 15 units or 25 units or 30 units, and you're still sort of in the day to day. And your property manager is sort of like trying to decide whether you need a property manager, and there's a lot of opportunity costs that you have to make when your opportunity cost calculations that you have to make when you're thinking about it at that level. But if you scale up quickly, if you're in 40 units or 50 units, it makes you have to get a property manager, right? So it allows you to go from an amateur to a professional very quickly. Now, again, 3 units, 4 units, 5 units, 10 unit buildings are, you don't need a professional property manager like you would if you have 100 units. But in other words, I like it so that I can get to scale quicker and I can get myself out of the business. I want to get myself out of the business faster.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. What's funny, you mentioned that because that was my first threshold. I was right around 44 units. And I realized I'm killing myself here, because I'm trying to invest and manage, and it's 2 different sets of skills.
Right.
So it was purely accidental. One of my tenants ended up starting to work for me, showing my vacancies. That was the first big thing I handed off, was show the vacancies, and I didn't have to deal with that thing anymore. And then she knew a cleaning crew, so I was able to offload that to do the clean outs. And then, that led to those people knew some contractors, so I was able to get some contractors then to do all the remodeling. And all of a sudden, I'm going from one at a time to doing as many as 7 projects at a time. And that was also about the time I left my day job at the PNC Bank. And my holdings and my success just catapulted from there. It just took off like a rocket, So it's funny you mentioned that. And I tell people, for some reason, that seems to be the threshold for almost all the people I've met. Some people say it's 10. I'm thinking, you want to learn the ropes. It helps to understand that part of the business so that when you're hiring people, you know what to expect from them, and they know what you're talking about,
Right. Right. Completely.
So let's move forward here. I know there's a couple of things you're getting into as you're growing and meeting people and expanding, but let's talk about the, what do we want to have our listeners do once they have some wealth? They got some properties, they got cash flow, they got equity. So what can they do to really not hide it, but protect their wealth for the legacy of their families? I've seen some other things, but what are some of the things you've seen?
Hi, Gary here. Just want to say thanks real quick for listening to the podcast. We really appreciate you doing that. And all I want to do is take a quick minute to introduce you to the Healing House Foundation. Okay, so if you're watching this on video, I'm going to let you see it. If you're on podcast, you're not going to be able to see it, but you can see it in the click on the show notes on globalinvestoragent.com, and you can see, well, that's the main website, globalinvestoragent.com. And this is a great place for you to connect, not just with me, but with all the agents we have around the country, and check it out. But more importantly, if you click on the Healing House Foundation, okay, you can read all about it. And this is a 501(c), totally voluntary. Nobody here makes a dime. So all the proceeds, 100%, go to local needs in your area where you live for people that need help, all walks of life. I mean, every one of us knows somebody that needs help. And this is our way to come back full circle in the world of real estate where we make so much money. Let's help those who are in need. Sometimes they need a helping hand. Sometimes they need to be taught how to fish, and sometimes they just need to fish. Sometimes they need both. So this is a way for you to participate. Check it out. All kinds of stories, examples. It's very flexible in that we can earmark funds for a particular need that you have in your area, as long as it's related to the need of housing. That's all. It doesn't matter what the underlying circumstances are. We pray for healing for everybody. So in any case, thanks for indulging me. Let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think about wealth building in sort of a circular route. Okay. The first route is you got to create cash. You got to have cash in order to build wealth. Now Doesn't take money to make money, but you got to find money. You got to raise money. You got to receive money to produce more money. But if we're just talking about from the perspective of your own money that you get from your rental properties or your business or your job, you got to capture it. You got to have that money. When you get that money, what are you going to do with it? You're going to put it into a bank. You got to capture it somewhere. Okay. The most important step here is we want to be more efficient and effective with each one of our dollars. That's what I was focusing on. And that's how my mentor taught me. Guy was worth about $120 million. And the reason why he was so successful is because from the jump, he learned how to be more efficient and effective with each one of his dollars. So he never had to take on outside capital to get to the level that he was at. Okay. So when we're thinking about cash capture, when we're thinking about being more efficient and effective with our dollars, we have to think about protection. As you said, we want to make sure that wherever we put our money, it's protected. That's incredibly important. But we also want to make sure when we put our money in a place, it's also in a place that avoids the biggest transfer of wealth out of our own personal economy.
Yeah.
Taxes, right? Yeah. Everyone probably knew that. So what I learned from my mentor is as you get wealthier, as you start to get more money in your personal economy, you got to store it somewhere. Instead of storing it in the bank, what you can do is you can store it in a specifically designed life insurance strategy that gives you dividends, that gives you tax-free growth between 4 to 6% over the lifetime that you have that policy in place. And why is this a really tremendous vehicle for a lot of real estate investors? Because when you put your money in this, it's earning 4 to 6% tax-free growth compounded over your life, which is a very respectable rate of return, right? And a lot of that's guaranteed. There's some additional dividends that you can participate in, but you can expect 4 to 6% over your lifetime. You can leverage it like you leverage a line of credit on your real estate and go out and buy more real estate, buy a business, use it to spend for dollar producing activities or things or assets. And at the same time, your money is working for you. So you have your own alternative of a bank that's getting 4 to 6% compounded, uninterrupted when you leverage it to go out and buy assets. And so if you look at that over your lifetime, you're giving up millions, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars of lost opportunity costs of that money that could have been earning interest for you. Mm-hmm. And what you do is you don't give up that interest when you have it in an account like this, and you can still leverage it as if it's still earning interest. So you're leveraging it and it's still earning interest. Does that all make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. We were back in the old days, a lot of the fluent folks that I was getting to know, this was back in the mid to late 80s when I first got started investing. They were using good old fashioned, simple whole life policies that had a cash value in that. And they would use that to transfer wealth to their heirs in the case that they passed away. And it was all tax-free, but they also would borrow the cash value to invest more and not have to involve the banks. Well, now here we are, 40, whatever, 30 some odd years later, and there's a lot of more products out there. There's, IULs and, universal life, index universal life. There's IULs that have a conduit account, and there's all kinds of variations I've seen. And it's almost mind-boggling how that industry has taken off. So what kind of things, if you wouldn't mind get a little granular on that, because I know this has been very popular in the last couple of years, and I know all the listeners right now they're turned up the volume, so they want to, hear maybe a case study or example or something, So
yeah. So let me give you an example of a client of mine. So a client of mine is a real estate investor. He's got a couple of hundred units, and the way that he uses this policy is he puts his repairs, his capital expenditures, and his taxes in it. Okay. So every year, as you get to a critical mass, Gary, some years you got that you got a lot of things you got to fix. Other years you get, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars that are just sitting in your account doing nothing for you, mm-hmm. and getting taxed at income tax rates. What he does is whenever he gets repairs and maintenance, he gets taxes, he gets his insurance, he gets his capital expenditures. He flows them into this account. So he's getting 4 to 6%. And then when he needs to pay for a large capital expenditure, his money has been working at 4 to 6% for him during that whole time period. So he can just leverage it via a line of credit to pay it back or to pay off whatever it is, if he needs a new roof or needs a couple of new roofs or whatever it is. But at that whole time period, his money's been working for him. So he doesn't give up the opportunity for his money to work for him in a tax-free manner. So this account that he has for his capital expenditures, his repairs, his taxes, his insurance grows larger and larger over the lifetime, so we can leverage it more and more, and even becomes his opportunity fund to invest in more deals. And so that's a specific example of I see a lot of real estate investors that they should use that in that way. That's the first way to get started and implement one of these policies.
Okay, so it sounds like he's there's one variation I'm thinking of here, and it sounds like that's what this is. So if you imagine like a spreadsheet, on the right-hand side, you've got the death benefit part of the policy and the accumulated cash value. Like you pay your premiums and a portion of that accumulates in a cash value account. Then there's another side, the left-hand side of the spreadsheet, there's a conduit account where people are literally putting in putting all their income in there, right? And then they're paying their expenses out of it. But like you said, it's actually earning, 4%, for example. And the residual that stays in there ends up building up over time. So in 10, 20, 30 years, it's like you have another annuity, almost like an IRA or something, and when you pull the money out. So that to me is really intriguing. We don't know a lot about that product yet, but we're exploring it. And so is that I'm on the right track as far as what you were describing?
So this is the one that we're talking about here is it is specifically designed whole life. Okay. So we're using the standard whole life. We're designing it the way that gives our investors early cash value, liquidity, and control. Okay. And we're working with a really reputable mutual company that's been declaring dividends for 200 years, right? Yeah. Since 1847, whatever that, not almost 200 years, right? And so that's what we're using. We're using whole life here to structure these policies, because the thing about whole life, what we really like about it, and what my mentor taught me about it, and why we like it at the Creative Capitalist firm, is that there are guarantees in it, right? With IULs or other specific products, there are no guarantees, and expenses can go up. If you have an IUL and say you get it when you're 25 or you're 35, your cost is your term insurance cost, your cost of insurance is going to be much lower than when you're 45, than when you're 55, and when you're 65. So a lot of times with these products is you see them implode when you're older because your cost of insurance goes up dramatically, and your cash value decreases because you have to use your cash value to pay for the additional expenses incurred by your age because of the term insurance costs. So we just use standard whole life insurance because there's guarantees, because it's going to be the same throughout your entire life. And because, 4 to 6% for a lot of real estate investors is a perfectly good thing. And it could be an alternative to retirement as well if, the world burns down.
Now, is that so because it's inside the whole life policy, is that 4 to 6%? Is that tax-free or tax-deferred, or is it you have to pay on that at tax time each year? As you?
That is a great question. Okay, so when I say tax-free, there's an important nuance here. Mm-hmm. There is a way that this becomes a tax-deferred growth vehicle. You can either do something which is called a MEC, which is a modified endowment contract. Mm-hmm. Essentially, it changes the structure in the eyes of the IRS and changes your life insurance policy to be a non-qualified annuity. Mm-hmm. We don't need to get into those nuances here. If you want to get into the nuances, we can. I'd love to get on the phone call to talk to someone about it. But the reason why it's called tax deferred is because if you withdraw more money out of the account in terms of a withdrawal, that will be taxed as ordinary income. Right? Because just like, I don't know what an example would be. If you take money out of a Roth IRA, even though this is not an exact example, that is above your cost basis, above the amount of money that you put in, that is taxed for the gains before your retirement age. And in this case, the gains are taxed. So you can't withdraw more than the money you put in
Okay.
On a tax-free basis.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm just taking a note here. That's so I like that because I know people are going to ask about. I'll get phone calls on this. Actually, you may get phone calls too. In fact, we probably should watch the clock here. We've got a few more minutes. All right. So we talked about real estate investing, and the reason I like the fact that we get on this subject is, obviously people can use those proceeds, those funds, to do more investing, and then all the income from the investing, they could roll back into it, and you do what the one gentleman did that you described, where he's running all of his expenses through it. So he's earning 4% on his expense money that would otherwise be sitting there earning nothing.
Exactly.
That's the whole circle you were talking about. If coming, it
increases what we're doing here is that the health of an economy. And I know we're running short on time here, but this is important. The health of an economy is measured by the velocity of capital in the economy, which is essentially your GDP divided by your M2, which is your money supply, right? If you increase your velocity of the money, in other words, the amount of times that you're using the same dollars, and in this case, if you're taking a life insurance loan and paying it back, you're using the same dollars multiple times, you're increasing the velocity of your money. What that means is you can get lower returns over longer periods of time and increases the quantity of those returns because you're using the same dollars over and over again. So that's an important nuance that the listeners have to understand, and why this is such a powerful strategy, which is why HELOCs are powerful as well. I mean, HELOCs are very powerful as well to create wealth.
Yeah. Well, let's we got another minute or two left. Let's talk about the current state of the economy and the country and the world. I mean, and I know it's all speculative, but the fact is, we're heading into a recession. I mean, anybody that doesn't see it is really probably being naive. And I'm not a pessimist. I'm one of the most positive people you could ever meet. But the thing is, this is my fifth market cycle. And even though the circumstances are always different, the last recession was different because real estate started the darn thing. Well, here, even without this trouble in Europe and Russia, we already had runaway inflation. We already have interest rates going up. And we also had a stock market that was going all over the place since January 1. And we were at or near the top of this current market. So all those factors, it's just like the old saying, what goes up must go down. The reason I don't worry about it is I also know whatever goes down always goes back up again. So you just have to understand what's happening, be prepared for it. But any thoughts or insight you can share related to that. In other words, so people are sitting there investing. Okay, well, does that mean do I buy more real estate? Do I sell some real estate? So along those lines, what's the best thing we can do to prepare for this, what we believe is an inevitable cycle?
Yeah, and I, just to echo this, I agree that I think we're going into some turbulent times, right? The most important thing here, you and I both know this, you know this more than I do, you got to have adequate cash reserves, right? Every real estate investment's a good investment. It doesn't matter what the market is if you got good cash reserves, because you can weather a storm, right? People who bought in 2008 and they had the money and they weathered and they kept on to 2021, they're happy.
Yep.
Right? So from a real estate perspective, it's sort of like, make sure that you're not over leveraging, and understand that interest rates are going up. So if you're my opinion, interest rates are going to continue to go up. They might be stifled, but I don't know if they can be down in these numbers for a prolonged period of time. Yeah. Be very careful about the debt that you take on. There's some adjustable rate mortgages. There's other mortgage products that are, 5-year locks and then adjustments after 5 years, or 10-year locks. 5-year locks I would be concerned about. I have a couple of 5-year locks and I'm like, ooh, this could be concerning. So fixed long-term debt, if you're a real estate investor, I think that's a tremendous way to go. Even if it's a higher interest rate, I think you're going to lock in a monthly payment, which is not variable and able to be compensated for, and then having adequate cash reserves. I think the market as I know it has been hot, and everything's sort of been easy for the past couple of years. Not easy in terms of competitiveness, but easy in terms of things are going up, right? It doesn't always go like that, as you know. So having adequate cash reserves and buying smart correctly, I think that's you can still make money in this market. You can still keep going in this market.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure, in any market cycle, it's always either going up or down. There's no such thing as neutral. It's always going up or down. And the cool thing about a down market is this. People are always upset and saying, all these people lost all this money. And I'm thinking, well, I agree with you, and I'm sorry about that. But there's a lot of other people that made a lot of money. So the wealth, like the properties, the real estate, doesn't actually go anywhere. The house is still sitting where the house was 10 years ago. It just changed hands. So what happens is the wealth is going from one hand to another. And for those who are prepared, you'll be on the receiving end of that wealth. And if you're not prepared, you're probably going to be on the losing end of that wealth. So my suggestion is listen to Clay and prepare. I started getting frugal, probably a couple of years ago, and really, getting more conservative. In early January, I just had this inkling. I thought, I'm gonna start taking some of my money out of some of the stock market that I was in and putting it in cash reserves. And I thought Ukraine could be a problem, but who knows? Nobody knows. Well, and that wasn't the decision. The decision was based on the other factors in the economy. And now, of course, my family thinks I'm a genius, but I said, look, I just followed my gut. I looked at the data. I looked at the past. And I realized, okay, yes, it's a different set of circumstances, but the fundamentals are the same. It's the same movie being played over again. Just a different set of characters. And that's why I did what I did. I'm a positive person. I love our country. I love this life we're in, but I also know that things sometimes go sideways, and you have to be prepared for that. So good words of wisdom there, Clay. I appreciate that, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this too. I think I'd like to have you back on again at some point, and then maybe we could do like a joint thing. I don't know how that would work, where we share it on both of ours, and then give people some examples of old properties we had. Things like that, some tips and pointers. And but in the meantime, everybody participating today and listening and watching, I really appreciate your time. And if you could, when you're done and you're getting ready to turn the engine off, Carl, please don't do that. Go leave a review, right? Look for this podcast, look for Clay Hepler, okay, and leave a review, because this was one of the better ones. And we love all of our podcast guests, but you guys got a lot of golden nuggets today, totally for free. And you leaving those reviews is the currency of the podcast business, and it doesn't cost a dime. So we appreciate that. In the meantime, God bless you and your families. We'll see you on the next podcast. Remember, go to globalinvestoragent.com. Grab yourself an investor agent. We're in 27 states. They're trained to work with you and I. They're not your traditional agent. These are special agents, okay? So grab one of those guys, and we'll see you next week on the next podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.